Till I got me lift up one voice, till I got me lift up one song, till I got me lift up one voice, singing hallelujah. Till I got me lift up one voice, till I got me lift up one song, till I got me lift up one voice, singing hallelujah.
All right, well, we are going to conclude our series on biblical generosity, and let me kind of recap a little bit the past few weeks for you. We started off looking at the question of, is there a connection between spiritual maturity and how we view our finances and our possessions? And we came to the conclusion that yes, there was a connection between our spiritual growth and how we view our money and our stuff. Last week we also looked at the fact that we are God's money managers, that everything we have ultimately is from God. Without Him, we have nothing. Every good and perfect gift comes from above. And so one day as Christians, we will stand before Almighty God and give an account of our lives. And this judgment seat isn't whether or not we're going to go to heaven. That's already been settled. This is, what did you do with the time and the resources that you had for Almighty God? We will all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. And so what I want us to really do and try to grab a hold of today is that reality that, and I think there's two realities. If we could believe these two realities, how we view our money, how we view our possessions, how we view all of our stuff, will be in a proper perspective if we grab a hold of these two realities. The realities are, one, that Jesus Christ can come back at any point in time that He wants. Two, that we're going to die, and there is an eternity awaiting for us. As Christians, it's eternity in heaven. If you're without Christ, it's an eternity in hell. I'm going to deal more with the Christians today, but also talk about the aspect of hell and whatnot in a little bit. But it matters how we invest our time and our resources. We talked about the fact last week that wherever there is growth, there's extra expense. And we kind of relayed that with our children. As our children grow, they get more expensive. I was telling the early service, like, if Rhett and I go to a restaurant and I get one of those 25-cent toys, he thinks it's the greatest thing in the world. That's not going to work when he's 17, right? Like, we're going to Bob Evans, come here, son. Let me get you a toy. You're like, Dad, just don't bother me. As they grow, there's expense. Why? Because wherever there is growth, there's always expense. Wherever there's life, there's expense. And we connected that with the church. As a church grows and is alive, there is always expense. And that is to be met by those who call this church their home. Now, if you want to be at a church where there is no expense, you simply go to a dead church, because where there is death, there is no added expense. It costs nothing for death. I mean, there's nothing to keep it the way it is. It's just dead. So we looked at that last week. Wherever there's growth, there's always expense. I prefaced all these things by saying, though, this series isn't about Bridgeway not being able to pay its bills, because all the bills are always paid and all the ink is all black. It's not about us having a bunch of debt, because we don't have any debt. That's not the point. This isn't a money grab or any of this. Is about us as believers viewing our money and our stuff the way God would have us to view it. It's about me as your pastor preaching the full counsel of God and tackling a subject that Jesus talked more about than heaven and hell combined. Money and possessions, Jesus nailed over and over and over and over again. The question we must ask ourselves as believers is, why did He do that? Again, it's probably because He knew this was going to be an issue for us. He knew this had the potential of becoming a God for us. So we had to look at our finances, look at our stuff in a proper viewpoint, God's viewpoint. And so we're going to tackle today really about how much should I give and what does that look like? Are we under the tithe, Brent? We don't live in the Old Testament. We're a New Testament church. So what does all that look like for us? We're going to try to answer that question today. But first, let's start in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. It says, "And whatsoever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor." This is Solomon talking. This guy, if you don't know who Solomon was, he was the richest king ever. And he said, anything I wanted, I could get. Nothing. He said, whatsoever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. If I wanted it, I got it. This dude didn't have to worry about bills, didn't have to worry about a nest egg, he didn't, anything. There's nothing off the table for this guy. You might think, well, that's a perfect setup, right? And this is what he says. He says, verse 11, I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. He says, it was complete and total emptiness. I had everything, and it was emptiness. Because we might think, well, man, if I just had so much, I would be able to solve a lot of the problems that I have. Solomon had everything, and it created new problems for him. I like what A.W. Tozer said. He said, as base a thing as money often is, it yet can be transmuted into everlasting treasure. It can be converted into food for the hungry and clothing for the poor. It can keep a missionary actively winning lost men to the light of the gospel and thus transmute itself into heavenly values. Any temporary possession can be turned into everlasting wealth. Whatever is given to Christ is immediately touched with immortality. Right there. Man, if we can grab a hold of that. Whatever I give to God is touched with immortality. It will not go to waste. C.S. Lewis said, we are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, and when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased. He says, you focus so much on the temporary things like a kid playing in a mud puddle when he could be by the ocean and enjoying a vacation. He says, we think of these temporary things as the most important. He says, we are way too easily pleased. There are things that are way greater than this, things that will outlive us. We have to keep our money and possessions in a proper perspective. I want to give you a quick example. It's one I've used before. I borrowed from Francis Chan. I was going to use a rope, but you see, I lost my keys this morning, and no, I did. You can ask the staff. I've been looking for them all morning. And the rope I was going to use is in my truck, and my truck is locked. And I'm pretty sure my keys aren't in my truck, but I don't know for sure. So I'm not the only one that loses their keys in this room, right? I mean, anybody else with me on that? Okay, do it all the time. Thank you. I'm not alone. So basically, I was like, Lord, should I use this example? And he's like, you got an extension cord. They'll be all right. Bridgeway folks are pretty easygoing. So just do a little pretending here with me, if you don't mind. This is actually a rope. It's not an extension cord. But anyways, I want you to imagine with me, if you would, that this green part is how long you are going to live, okay? Now, none of us know exactly how long we're going to live. But let's say it could be 70, 80 years. It could be less. It could be more. Who knows? But this is how long you are going to live. And that's it. Or let's say Jesus could come back at any point in time. Here, there. I don't know exactly. But let's just imagine for a minute we're all gonna live until we die. And then this is it. And let's say this orange part here, all of this orange part, I spread it out a little more. This is going to be eternity. It just keeps going and going and going and going and going. You guys get the idea of eternity, right? Like, come on, Brent. We know what you're talking about.
What about the end?
Yep. Eternity, there is no end, bud. That's a good question. See, well, I don't have an eternal cord. You're killing me, Cole. You're killing me. If I did, I'd be in the cord business, bud, because I'd be selling some cords. Anyways, imagination first a little bit. This is how long you're going to live. And eternity is going on and on and on and on. And the point Jesus is making when he says, hey, don't lay up for yourselves treasures upon earth where moth and rust does corrupt, these break through and steal, but lay for yourselves treasures in heaven. Why is he talking about that? Because you have this much to invest in all of this. To make an investment with your money, with your possessions, with your talents, with your gifts, with your time. This is the amount of time you get to do something that's going to matter in all of eternity. And Jesus is just pointing out, he says, it doesn't make sense to waste all of your stuff for this right here. See, the idea is for us as Christians not to think about this part, but to be thinking constantly about this part. Like, this is what matters. Now the question's been raised. Well, Brent, we talked about the rich guy who built barns and stuff. Let me just tell you about that real quick in case you didn't know what we were talking about. Jesus gave an example of a guy who he was a farmer and he was successful, so he built barns. And he was really successful, so he tore down his barns and built bigger barns. And Jesus called the guy a fool. And the issue with that is, I'm not saying don't save for retirement. Obviously, you need to prepare it. I mean, to be able to buy your meals and that kind of stuff and meet your needs. But the problem with the rich dude was he was poor towards God and rich towards himself. The idea for us as Christians is to be rich towards God and let God take care of the needs. Yes, we should work. Yes, we should plan. But our first priority is being rich towards God and investing in eternity. And that investment, it does include our money, how we spend it, how we use it. So Jesus just pointed out, hey, it doesn't make a lot of sense, Christians, for you to just care about this and not think about this. This is where it's where our minds and our hearts need to be, because this is what's going to matter in the end. So I want us to be thinking about that as we look at some other things here. And the question is, why is it so hard for us, though? Why can giving be this massive hurdle that it is so hard to get over? Not just giving of our finances, but even our time or our serving. Why is it so difficult? I'm going to try to answer that question for us. Look at Malachi. Malachi chapter 1. And I don't have it in my notes, so I'm just going to use the screen with you guys. Malachi 1. And let me give you a little background here so this makes sense. So Malachi is the last book in the Old Testament. There's going to be 400 years between Malachi and Gospel of Matthew. Okay, 400 years there. Anyways, the children of God at this point, they become a lot like the church is today. See, what they were hearing over and over again was, hey, the Messiah's coming. The Messiah's coming. They've been preaching this for years. The Messiah's coming. He's coming. The Messiah is going to come. Did you guys know the Messiah's coming? The Messiah's going to come. And eventually they're like, yes, we know Messiah's coming. We're doing our offerings, and we're doing all we're supposed to be doing. Much like how the church is today when we say, hey, Jesus is coming back. You guys know Jesus is coming back? He's coming back. Like, for real. This is actually a real thing. But yes, I know Jesus is coming back, Brent, for crying out loud. That's how these people were. That was their mindset. And check it out. This is what's happening. A son honors his father, and a servant his master. If then I be a father, where is my honor? And if I be a master, where is my fear? Saith the Lord of hosts unto you, O priests that despise my name. And you say, wherein have we despised thy name? You offer polluted bread upon my altar, and you say, wherein have we polluted thee? And that you say, the table of the Lord is contemptible. Keep going. There we go. And if you offer the blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? And if you offer the lame and sick, is it not evil? Offer it now unto the governor. Will he be pleased with thee, or accept thy person, saith the Lord of hosts? And now I pray you, beseech God that he will be gracious unto us. This hath been by your means. Will he regard your persons, saith the Lord of hosts? Now, let me break that down for you real quick. God's basically like, you guys are bringing moldy bread and blind sacrifices to me, and you're expecting that to be good enough. You're coming before me with this half-hearted attitude of, yeah, the Messiah's coming. Here you go, God. Here's the sacrifice. Hope you enjoy it. So you're not giving me your best. And God's like, I deserve your best. I don't deserve your half-hearted effort. I don't deserve this moldy sacrifice that you claim to be giving me. See, it matters how you view ministry, how you view giving. That's why Scripture tells us to give with a cheerful heart. Our attitude behind it should matter. How you serve. If you're serving because it's an obligation and not an opportunity, I'm sorry, but your outlook on serving is wrong. Like, okay, I'll do this because nobody else wants to do it. Come on. I mean, seriously. God's like, I don't want that. Furthermore, look at verse 10. Check this out. Who is there even among you that would shut the doors for naught? Neither do ye kindle fire on my altar for naught. I have no pleasure in you, saith the Lord of hosts, neither will I accept an offering at your hand. He says, I wish someone would go and shut the doors to the temple, because I don't want anything from you. If you're not going to give me everything you got, if you're not going to give me your best, I don't want anything from you. Because I am worthy of your best, is what God is saying. And so often we're like, okay, I'll do this because I got to. Nobody else is going to do it. And our attitude towards serving or towards giving can be this mundane, half-hearted approach. And God's like, you're better off just not doing anything. I don't want it from you. I deserve your best. And he does. When it comes to our finances, yeah, God, he does deserve our best. So often we give God the leftovers like, okay, God, I'm going to give you this just enough to make sure you're off my back. And I feel good about myself. We're going to talk about what giving looks like here in a moment, and it can involve sacrifice. And it should involve sacrifice. Why? Because we as Christians claim to want to be like Jesus, and to be like Jesus means you know what sacrifice is like. Because he sure does. Why do we do this? Why are we like that? 2 Peter answers it for us, if we go there real quick. The background to chapter 1 here is Peter's talking about all these things people should be adding to their faith as they grow and they flourish in their faith, but they're not adding them. I mean, they're kind of mundane in their faith. And he tells them why. But he that lacks these things is blind. He cannot see afar off. He's forgotten that he was purged from his old sins. The reason we view all these things half-heartedly, the reason we can sometimes act like the priest in Malachi, like, okay, God, here's some moldy bread. Hope you're happy with that. Here's some leftovers, God. I hope you're happy with that, instead of giving God our best, is because we're nearsighted. We're thinking about this and not thinking about this. He says you cannot see afar off. The reason you're like that is you're blind. You don't see beyond this temporary time, but yet we are created for this. And Christians, this is what we should be living for and striving for, is making an impact on this. He furthermore says, the reason is because you've forgotten just how forgiven you are. If God did nothing else for us, if no other blessing upon our life, if he simply saved your soul and gave you a relationship with him, that would be enough. The reason we give God our half-hearted efforts, mumble under our breath, okay, I'll do this, is because you've forgotten just how forgiven you are. And what message does that send to God? It cost him a lot for us to be saved. You've forgotten. Like, completely forgotten what I've done. That's why when maybe we talk about money or we talk about possessions, people kind of put walls up, like, hold on a minute. I trust God with all this. I trust him to save me, but you're asking a lot. Not really. Because if he's able to save my soul for all this, I think I can trust him in other areas of my life. Money being one of them. I mean, Jesus went so far in Matthew to say, essentially, I take care of birds. I will take care of you. Seek me above everything else. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. All these things will be added unto you. He says, I take care of birds. I'm going to take care of you. But you've got to trust me. You've got to trust me. So we start with asking the question, are you giving God your best when it comes to your finances as well? So whatever we give to God gets touched with immortality. So let's look at some scriptures. Let's talk about, okay, well, Brian, how much should I give? What does that look like for me? Proverbs 3:9. Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the first fruits of all thy increase. Malachi 3. Will the man rob God? Yet have you robbed me. But you say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. You're cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. But Brent, we live in the New Testament, man. You're right, we do. We're not under the law. And there's no mention of tithing after the Gospels, except for in Hebrews, where Abraham, they're talking about Abraham tithing to the priest Melchizedek. Jesus, the tithe is mentioned in the Gospels with the Pharisees. So what are we supposed to do? What does it look like for us as believers? Where should we start? How should we give? Well, I mean, first we have to ask ourselves the question, does this new covenant of God's grace require of us to give less or to give more? And Jesus never lowered the bar. He always raised it, first of all. When you see giving in the New Testament, it is extravagant and it is incredibly generous. Over and over and over again. So, and I know when we read like of Barnabas who sold a piece of land and gave it to the apostles, that's not saying every Christian has to do that. But that was something that God laid on his heart and something that he did. But the question is, do we give Should we give less or should we give more? What does that look like for us? The average Christian family gives between 2 to 3%. And really, my view when it comes to giving and to tithing is that tithing is like the ground floor. It's a starting point. I mean, it's mentioned in the Old Testament, obviously. They were bringing their first fruits to God. And then in the New Testament, we see people give beyond that. What you won't find is in the New Testament where people aren't instructed to give at all. I mean, that's never the case. The early church was extremely generous, and they were generous because they were trying to reach people. The cause that they were a part of was something they believed in. And I believe many people can't say they can't afford to give, and the reason they can't afford to give is because they're not giving. I mean, Haggai talks about paying our debt to God first and incurring his blessing upon us. We are told over and over again that if we give, we will be blessed. Not just in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament. You'll see in a moment. But I would say this. I would say it's much easier to live on 90% or 80% or 70% and be in the will of God than live on 100% and not give at all. That's just my opinion, but I would say we probably would be in better shape. Luke 6 says this, "Give and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that you meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. Give, and it shall be given. You will be blessed." Now, what does that look like? Because maybe you're thinking, okay, Brent, you're starting to sound like a TV preacher. You give $100, you sow that seed of $100, you're going to get $1,000. It's going to show up in your bank account miraculously, and you're going to be set, you're going to be good to go. That's not what I'm saying. Can God bless us financially? Sure, he can. I mean, that can look like a much different ways. I don't know what that may be for your life. But it can be a new job, it can be a raise, it can be multiple things that God can bless us with financially. But God's blessings are not limited to mere money. That blessing can look different in all of our lives. It can be health, it can be a relationship, it can be healing, it can be many, many different things. I can't say exactly what it would be in your life. I just know God said, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And since God has a track record of never breaking a promise, I'm going to have to go with him on that. That makes sense for me to give. And I would say start with the tithe. 10%. Now, my family and I, we don't give 10%. We give, I believe, 13. 12 or 13. I know it's around there. And hopefully in the future, we'll be able to grow in that. Why do I say that to you? First of all, I'm not going to preach about this and not do it myself, okay? The only thing they're saying, okay, hypocrite preacher, he's preaching about it but doesn't do it himself. No, we do it. We have, as far as I can remember. In fact, I'll tell you about, okay, the last time I used my tithe money or something other than giving to God, I can tell you exactly what it was. It was 2001, and I think I was working in tobacco for some tobacco farmers, and earned some money, and had spent most of my money. I had saved my money for my tithe, but I was like, I really want to go see a movie, and it was disappointing, by the way. Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, awful movie. You guys know what I'm talking about. Jar Jar Binks. That ruined it for everybody. But yeah, it was. Yeah, and you weren't even alive when it came out. That's crazy.
But I've seen it.
Okay, yeah, it's bad. And I love you, man. I do. Well, it's a saga. It's not a trilogy. But we'll talk about that later. Anyways, so I went with my brother Brian, and he used his tithe money too, because I wasn't the only heretic out there that day. Because I remember we were like, "So did you use your tithe money?" I was like, "Yeah." And it was the life lesson in that was anything I've given to God has never been wasted. As A.W. Tozer said, it touches immortality. I've never regretted giving to God. I regret the $7.50 I wasted on that movie. But everything I've given to God touches immortality. It's never, not one single regret. And so I would encourage you that the tithe, 10%, is a great place to start, and then grow from there. Maybe find a charity you're passionate about. Whit and I, we love Compassion International, and so we give to that every month, and we'll continue giving to that every month. It's something that we care a lot about. Find a charity that is gospel-based and invest in it. Go beyond. And 20 years from now, I can be like, oh man, really wasted my money investing in the work of God and helping a child who potentially would never have an opportunity to know Christ. There are plenty of things we can regret spending our money on. I've never regretted giving to God. It's money well spent. Why? Because it doesn't end right here. Everything else does. Everything else goes on and on. Everything else is wasted, but our gifts to God go on and on and on and on and on. Acts chapter 20. I have showed you all things, and how it's so laboring that you ought to support the weak, and to remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he said it is more blessed to give than to receive. And do we believe that? If we want to be more like Christ, we must give more of ourselves away. I believe that wholeheartedly. And part of that does include your finances. What you'll discover as well is financial giving is not, at the end of the day, it's not hard. You come up with a plan and you execute it. In fact, I told the earlier service, if giving is not something you're doing right now, I'm going to give you a date for you to start. Okay? So I want you to go home. I want you to talk with your spouse. If you don't have a spouse, I want you to just sit there and come up with a plan and say, okay, God, this is I'm giving this to you. Start with what you're giving to God. Off the top. Say, Lord, this is what I'm giving to you. And then work out the rest of your budget. Again, I find it to be more of a blessing to live on 90% or 80% in the will of God than 100% not in the will of God. So December 11th. Why December 11th? That is the day of our Christmas offering. We do it every year. We give to missions every single month. Maybe you don't know that, but we do. December 11th, we give an entire Sunday's offering away. And we're going to be splitting that up between two ministries. A Child's Hope, which is the ministry almost all our people are familiar with. And then the Lottie Moon offering. That's a Southern Baptist missions offering that we're going to give to. Lottie Moon was one of their missionaries from years ago. She's in heaven now, but that's just the name of the offering. We're going to split that entire offering for those two ministries. So December 11th, that gives you some time to sit down, look at your books, look at your finances, and come up with a plan. And at Bridgeway, we make it really easy to give. You can give online, you can give through the box, you can even text it if you want. But the idea behind it is, and the question you should be asking yourself is, am I rich towards God or am I poor towards Him? How have I viewed my finances in light of eternity? Because as A.W. Tozer said, whatever we give to God touches immortality. 100 years from now, all of us are going to be dead. I know that's kind of morbid, but it's reality. Unless you're the Guinness Book of World Records person who lived for like 130 years. 100 years, well, and it'll matter what you did. Not just with your money, but with your time, with your resources. In this green little section here. It's going to matter. Furthermore, the question you should ask yourself this morning is, am I giving God my best while I have time to give Him my best? So let's think about that this morning as we pray. If you bow with me this morning.
Up from the ashes, your love has brought me. our God we lift up one voice. To our God we lift up one song. To our God we lift up one voice. Sing hallelujah. To our God we lift up one voice. To our God we lift up one song. To our God we lift up one voice. Sing hallelujah. Chains have been broken, eyes have been opened, the army of dry bones is starting to rise. Death is defeated, we are victorious, you are alive. To our God we lift up one voice. To our God we lift up one song. To our God we lift up one voice. Sing hallelujah. To our God we lift up one voice. To our God we lift up one song. To our God we lift up one voice. Sing hallelujah. Hallelujah. Singing hallelujah. Hallelujah. We make his praise glorious, glorious, glorious. For his name is glorious, glorious, glorious. We make his praise glorious, glorious, glorious. So his name so glorious, glorious, glorious. To our God we lift up one voice. To our God we lift up one song. To our God we lift up one voice. Sing hallelujah. To our God we lift up one voice. To our God we lift up one song. To our God we lift up one voice. Sing hallelujah. Hallelujah. Sing hallelujah. Hallelujah. Make his name glorious, glorious, glorious. For his name glorious, glorious, glorious. Make his praise glorious, glorious, glorious. Set his name glorious, glorious, so glorious. To our God we lift up one voice. To our God we lift up one song. To our God we lift up one voice. Sing hallelujah. To our God we lift up one voice. To our God we lift up one song. To our God we lift up one voice. Sing hallelujah. 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 Up from the ashes, your love has brought us out of the dark.